Hi everyone, I hope you're good guy. Welcome for a new video. Today we're gonna talk about industrial techno percussion. This kind of percussion which are like filtered, flangered, with some kind of weird metallizer as well. That's what we're gonna recreate. So it works for industrial techno, but it works as well for hypnotic techno. I will show you. So first we're gonna have a listen, then we're gonna recreate the rack from scratch, and then finally I will show you how to use the rack, what does each macro, and yeah, let's see how it sounds. So basically you have a very dry signal like this, and then when you apply the rack, you instantly get, you can add some flanger, and you have this rattle effect as well, which is nice. And it can work as well if you have an audio loop. That's a already pre-made audio loop, but it's a good way to make your own basically. Again, so I will go a little bit more in detail with the macro, what it does later on, but it works as well with synth as well, so you can obviously try to experiment with synth sound. So without the synth sound like this, but when I apply the rack, alright, so what this rack is made of. So we're gonna build it from scratch like this, you can understand better, and I will give you some tips along as well to how you can appropriate yourself and make your own. So the principle, the base, it's pretty kind of simple. You need a kind of ping pong delay. So I've got my delay here in Ableton, and you got this ping pong here. You can leave the feedback around 30%. Let me actually, so yeah, like this is fine. Next thing you need to do is bring a reverb. So you can just grab a reverb in Ableton and drop it. You want a bigger decay time, like maybe around 3 seconds. And yeah, then after you can experiment with the size and with the diffuse if you want something a little bit sounding bigger. So now we're gonna group this because, so that's basically our base, which is already making our pattern way much more groovier. So first thing we need to add is auto filter. So you could hear was like this filter modulation, and we're gonna do this with auto filter. So you can use either bandpass or high pass filter. I was using first the bandpass, but I found out that the high pass filter works better because for this kind of loop, usually I use high percussion loop. It's not like for tom and stuff like that. So having a high pass filter works better. The idea of the auto filter is having, so now I'm making the filter move manually, but basically I'm gonna use the LFO to make this movement, and I'm gonna be able to control the LFO rate to have different kind of grooves. So you want your amount of LFO around, let's say 20, and you can hear it's moving up. I'm gonna put in sync mode the LFO rate, and I'm gonna, and you can hear already how it's moving, and it's add even more movement. So then after, it depends what you're looking for. Maybe you want something slow, more hypnotic moving, slow moving for hypnotic techno. So that way you're gonna go with a slow rate around 8, 6, something like this. But if you want something more rhythmic, you can go around something like 1 or 1/2. And yeah, so you want to apply this macro actually to, you want to apply this parameter to the macro. So you're gonna go here and macro 5. So then after, the way you set which filter you want, which type, the resonance, it's really up to you. You can experiment with, obviously, but I would leave like this by default, and it's worked well. And next things we want to add is a flanger. So I'm just gonna use the default one by Ableton because it just works well. And so again, I'm gonna map this to macro 2. And one of the main things with the flanger is like, again, having the LFO modulating and having that. So I'm gonna, again, I leave the 100% the amount of the LFO, and I'm gonna choose the rate to map on the macro 6. So I put in sync again the rate, and I'm gonna map to macro 6. And one tip I can give you here, you can play with the filter LFO rate and the flanger LFO rate, and kind of having them crossing each other and kind of create new rhythm just by using the filter and the flanger. By having different kind of speed, it can be really nice. You can really get some wicked. And yeah, I'm pretty happy with that already. Alright, so next one is the rattle, what I call rattle effect, which is like an effect similar to Dubfire and Richard Twin type of delay effect they use in their DJ set. So I'm just gonna grab a delay. Oh, sorry, it needs to be here. So I'm gonna rename it like this. We don't messed up. So you want, the important thing is to put the sync in time, and I'm gonna deactivate actually all the effect like this. You're gonna really hear what this effect does particularly, because so you see it's by time, so if I have a slow delay you can hear it. Here it is important to put your dry rate at 50% because you want a good amount of dry, and feedback maybe around 80%. Like this you get this kind of granular effect. The filter, it's up to you. I will put like this. It needs to be in a repitch mode as well by default. And now the interesting thing is when I'm gonna modulate manually the time, you're gonna hear this kind of pitch variation. So this obviously when you add and you see when you go close to 1 millisecond, you kind of get a flanger effect, which is nice as well. So you want to map this to macro 3, and it's gonna be our rattle effect. So now the thing is, even if I go at minimum, I have always the effect activated by default, and I don't want that. So you need to map the toggle on off. You know I do this often. You right click on the toggle on off and you map it to rattle, and then when you go to map, the minimum, instead of putting 64, you put just 1. So this way when it's at 0, the device is deactivated, but as far as you crank up a little bit the macro, it activates the device. So here you can see it activated as far as I just go up a little, and this way. And now you can see 1 millisecond is a very fast delay, and around 200, 300 milliseconds it's a very slow delay. And I want the opposite. I want to start with a slow delay, and the more I go up, the more I get a fast delay. So the best way to do that is basically to inverse here 1 millisecond and 5 seconds. So 5 seconds, 1 millisecond. Second things, 5 seconds is way too long. Usually I don't go much than 200, 300 milliseconds. So you can bring down around, let's say 260. The thing is like this, you have like more control. You can be more precise with your macro, and you don't have. And I have an extra things to that. I actually modulate the time with the LFO. This way you can have this kind of flanger effect. So here in delay, you have this modulation, and you can choose the time to modulate. So by default, I will put 100%. Again, you can experiment with that. And I'm gonna map the rate actually to macro 7. By default, it's around 12. So this way, let me remove. You can hear the pitch going up and down, and with kind of weird delay as well. So again, you can experiment with the LFO, get. Here you get something more rhythmical. You can combine with the filter, with the flanger. really gets kind of getting crazy here. Obviously, I didn't mention, but you don't need to use always all the effect in the same time. Sometimes you can just use the filter, sometimes just the flanger, sometimes just the rattle, or just two, or that's really up to you. So the next macro that I add, I call it metallizer. It's basically a reverb. I wanted to add a kind of metallic reverb. So here I'm gonna map straight away the reverb dry rate. Here I'm not gonna leave at 100% because I don't need to go that much, otherwise you lose your dry signal. So I'm just gonna go until, let's say, 50%, and this way again to have more control on your macro. So this works well with, and my idea is when I bring up the reverb, I want this kind of metallic effect. So this you need to tweak a little bit your reverb in order to have that. Here again you can experiment, but in order to have this kind of metallic stuff, I'll pre-delay at 0, and I recommend to bring the size very down, around 1 maybe. Bring the density up. Maybe I'm gonna remove the rattle, like this you will hear better. And you can bring the diffuse up as well. Then after you can maybe EQ this way. After it's really up to you how you want, but you can bring maybe the decay of the reverb. Like this you hear a bit more the effect. But with the rattle, I really like the way it works with the rattle effect. Alright, so let's just rename it before. And then the last one is a Redux. I usually, every time I do something industrial or this type, I like Redux because it's nice to have a bit of gridness sometimes. Redux here. So here after it's up to you. You can add before your delay and your reverb, or you can add it after. I will add just before the delay. Here you put in soft mode, and here you're gonna map this to macro 8, and again you're gonna map the toggle on off to the macro, and then again here when you go to map, you go here, you put 1. Here say maybe you don't need until the end, but yeah. So yeah, this is again can be nice to add variation during your track. And yeah, that's pretty much it. That's pretty much how I build the rack. So now let's talk about Midi Pattern, because it's something quite important as well. So one of the basic stuff you can do and you can start with, it's basically, so you have your 1 bar here, and you have usually what works well, this effect is tan 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 tan. That's the basic stuff you can start with. And so like this, and then you just duplicate. This way you got, okay, let me actually remove the right. And then usually this works well. But after, what I like to do is, as you can see here, there is a lot, and what I've done is something I like. You just duplicate, and you can now on the new one create a new variation and just try things maybe. And then again duplicate, and then again play with this one. And of course you can play with the velocity, you can play with the groove pool, you can pitch as well, like transpose some of them at +7 semitone, +5 semitone, +3 semitone, +12, -5, -7, and so on. That's really up to you. You can experiment with that as well. It can be nice to have something. So yeah, what I was saying basically earlier with the LFO rate, it's basically trying to, if you want something fast, usually 1, 2, and 3, 4 like this work well, but you can go even slower. For example, if you want a more slow for your filter, and then the flanger. one very slow, or maybe 6. Like this is kind of never looping the same way. You can really get some wicked percussion loop. And so here we are going at 140, but you can even do like more hypnotic techno around 130 and it will work well as well. That's really up to you. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I'll show you everything. So as usually, the rack is available for free. The link is in the description. And yeah, thank you very much for watching, guys, and see you soon, guys. Bye bye.